I unlocked the front door of our penthouse as quietly as I could, setting my heavy travel bag down on the wooden floor. I had taken an earlier flight back from the server deployment in Tokyo just to surprise Chloe. 3 long weeks off-grid in a subterranean data center had left me exhausted, but the thought of seeing her kept me moving. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the velvet box containing the custom band I had bought to match her engagement ring. Voices floated from the living room. Low, intimate, and followed by a quiet laugh that made me freeze mid-step. "He really has no idea, does he?" a deep, familiar voice asked. Julian Croft, our lead investor. The man who had spent 6 months convincing us he was just a friendly mentor helping our startup reach the big leagues. "Ethan thinks the world revolves around server racks and firewalls," Chloe replied, her tone laced with a light, mocking humor I had never heard from her before. "He's completely off-grid until Tuesday. By the time he boots up his phone, the board votes will be finalized." I stepped carefully toward the hallway archway, staying deep in the shadows. The apartment was dim, lit only by the amber glow of the city skyline pouring through the floor-to-ceiling glass. "And the administrative keys?" Julian asked. I heard the soft clink of 2 whiskey glasses touching. "He holds the primary route access." "Already taken care of," Chloe said smoothly. I submitted the emergency management override using his digital signature while he was mid-flight. The board accepts it as a standard security protocol update. On Monday morning, his access gets permanently revoked. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. The air in my lungs turned to ice. Fiance's tech wasn't just a business to me, it was 5 years of 80-hour work weeks, missed holidays and burnt-out health. I had built the entire core encryption model from nothing. "You're ruthless, Chloe," Julian chuckled, his voice drawing closer to her. "I like that. What about the ring he gave you? The one he spent 3 months designing?" I heard a soft sigh, followed by the clatter of small metal against the marble coffee table. "Please," Chloe sneered softly. "It's a budget rock from a local jeweler. Ethan's idea of romance is efficiency and sentimentality. He lacks vision, Julian. He's a lead developer, not a CEO." "He built the engine, my dear," Julian said. "But we own the car now." "We own everything," she corrected him. "He can take his small buyout check and start a little consulting firm somewhere else. He'll survive. He's tough." "And if he fights back?" Julian asked. "With what money?" Chloe laughed softly. "His equity drops to 2% the moment the new share dilution clears on Monday. He won't even be able to afford a decent lawyer to fight my legal team, let alone yours." I stood frozen in the dark corridor, my knuckles white against the edge of the hallway wall. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to walk into that room, shatter Julian's glass against the wall, and demand to know how the woman I loved could dismantle my life so casually. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand an explanation. Instead, I looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking anymore. A strange, eerie coldness washed over my mind, burning away the shock and leaving behind pure, crystal-clear focus. They thought I was just a tech guy. They thought my only value was the code I had written for their interface. They had completely forgotten who actually held the structural keys to the federal networks we operated on. "To new beginnings," Julian said in the room, his glass clinking again. "To complete control," Chloe answered. I didn't make a sound. I slowly backed down the dimly lit hallway, picked up my heavy travel bag by the strap, and stepped out into the quiet corridor. The heavy door clicked shut behind me with a soft, final thud. Standing by the elevator, I took a deep breath, pulled out my encrypted phone and powered it on. The screen lit up, illuminating the dark lobby. I opened my private terminal, looked at the master security framework running in the background and closed my eyes. "You want the company, Chloe?" I whispered to the empty hallway as the elevator doors slid open. "You can have the shell." The glass doors of Fiance's tech slid open with a soft hiss as I walked into the lobby at 8 in the morning. I kept my face blank, my shoulders relaxed and my posture casual. Nobody looking at me would ever guess that my entire life had been demolished 16 hours ago in my own penthouse. "Good morning, Ethan," the receptionist called out cheerfully. "Did you enjoy Tokyo?" "It was productive, Sarah," I replied, giving her a small, practiced smile. "Is Chloe in yet?" "She's in a private conference call with Mr. Croft," Sarah said, tapping her keyboard. "She mentioned you'd probably drop by today." "Thanks," I murmured, heading down the familiar corridor toward my office. Before I could reach my door, a firm hand grabbed my elbow and yanked me sideways. I stumbled into the dark, narrow server storage closet. The door clicked shut behind us, locking instantly. What the hell, Marcus? I whispered, staring at my lead server engineer. Marcus Reed was pale. His eyes were wide behind his thin wire glasses, and his breath came in short, nervous hitches. He clutched a thick yellow folder against his chest like a shield. Ethan, you need to look at this right now, Marcus hissed, his voice trembling. They think I haven't noticed, but I run the audit logs every night. Slow down, I said, keeping my voice level. Who thinks what? Chloe and Julian, Marcus said, shoving the paper file into my hands. Look at the IP transfers from Friday night while you were flying over the Pacific. I opened the folder under the dim fluorescent light. Printed line by line were the legal asset reassignments. My eyes scanned the text, reading the cold, corporate reality. They transferred the core encryption architecture, I said quietly, reading out loud. Under Croft Holdings LLC. They stripped your name off the underlying patents, Marcus said, his voice cracking with anxiety. Your equity got diluted to less than 2% under an emergency restructuring clause Chloe filed. You don't own the engine anymore, Ethan. They stole it right out from under you. I closed the folder with a quiet snap. Ethan, say something. Marcus pleaded, grabbing my shoulder. You've worked on this code for 5 years. You lived on coffee and couch cushions in this office. They're taking everything on Monday. I know, I said. Marcus blinked, pulling his hand back. You know? I heard them last night, I replied, my voice disturbingly calm even to my own ears. In the apartment. And you're not screaming? Marcus stared at me like I had lost my mind. They just robbed you. Julian Croft is going to license your defense network protocols to the federal government for $50 million, and you're going to get a severance check for 50 grand. What are we going to do? I looked at the server racks humming behind him. The cool air circulated with a steady rhythm. Marcus, I said softly, looking him dead in the eye. Who holds the federal Tier 1 security clearance for the system? Marcus paused, his mouth slightly open. You do. Personally. And who signed the liability framework with the Department of Defense last month? You did, Marcus whispered, his eyes widening as realization dawned on him. The corporate paperwork means nothing without the operational clearance. If your personal key drops out of the registry, the servers will refuse to authenticate. I finished the sentence for him. The entire architecture shuts down instantly to prevent unauthorized access. The core code they stole becomes completely useless junk. They think they own the house, Marcus breathed, a slow, nervous smile breaking across his pale face. But you hold the key to the front door. Exactly, I said. They have the lawyers, the paperwork, and the investor money. But they don't have the key. And they never will. Marcus looked toward the heavy door of the storage room, then back at me. Julian has 3 military contractors coming in for a demonstration at 11 on Monday. If the system fails, Julian gets investigated for selling illegal, unverified military assets, I said. And Chloe goes down with him. Marcus swallowed hard, taking a step back. That's brutal, Ethan. They made their choice, Marcus, I said coldly. Now you have to make yours. My choice. I'm walking out of this building today, I said, looking him in the eye. I'm going to let them play their game until Monday morning. When the time is right, I pull my clearance. The company sinks. Anyone left on board goes down with it. Marcus pressed his back against the metallic shelf, looking terrified. Ethan, I have a mortgage. I have 2 kids. I know, I said gently. That's why I'm asking you right now. Do you want to stay on a sinking ship with people who betray their partners, or do you want to come with me? Marcus stared at me for 5 long seconds. The silence in the small storage closet was heavy, broken only by the steady hum of the cooling fans. Slowly he reached down to his belt, unclipped his security access badge and pulled off his keycard. He held them out to me. I signed up to work with you, Ethan, Marcus said, his voice steadying. Not those corporate sharks. Tell me what you need me to do. I took his badge and placed it inside my jacket pocket, right next to the velvet ring box. Clear your desk quietly before noon, I whispered. Don't touch the server logs. Let them think everything is running smoothly. And then? Marcus asked. And then, I smiled, feeling the ice in my chest turn into pure determination. We get out of the way and let gravity do its job. The frosted glass doors of the primary boardroom opened silently at 10 on Monday morning. I stood near the window, watching the harbor below as the room filled with investors and high-ranking defense delegates. I wore my standard charcoal suit, keeping my expression neutral, my hands resting calmly inside my pockets. The heavy doors creaked again as Chloe walked into the room. She was wearing an Italian silk designer dress I had never seen before, clearly a gift from Julian Croft, who walked half a step behind her like a proud predator. "Ethan," Chloe said smoothly, stopping across the long mahogany conference table. Her voice lacked any warmth, completely hollowed out of the affection we had shared for 5 years. "I see you made it." "Of course I did," I replied quietly. "It's the biggest deal in the history of Vance Hayes Tech." "It isn't Vance Hayes Tech anymore, Ethan," Julian said, stepping forward with a smirk playing on his lips. He adjusted his tailored cuffs and gestured toward the screen displaying the buyout proposal. The board voted unanimously on Friday evening to rebrand the entire entity under Croft Industries. "We are streamlining the management structure to focus on commercial enterprise." "I see," I said, looking directly at Chloe. "And my role in this new structure?" Chloe didn't flinch. She reached into her leather folder, pulled out a thick white document, and slid it across the polished table toward me. "This is your formal severance package," she said, her voice dry and mechanical. "We are offering you $200,000 in cash, along with a 6-month health benefit extension, in exchange for your immediate resignation and the forfeiture of all remaining equity options." "200,000?" I asked softly, picking up the top page. "For 5 years of building the entire core architecture from scratch?" "Be realistic, Ethan," Chloe scoffed, folding her arms. "You were always just the tech guy. You spent all your time staring at code in dark server rooms while Julian and I built the actual network that makes this company valuable. You don't have the vision to run a corporate empire. Take the money." "You built the network?" I repeated, looking her straight in the eye. "Is that what you tell yourself?" "Look at the reality, son," Julian interjected, leaning his hands on the back of Chloe's chair. "We have 3 senior military procurement officers joining this meeting in 10 minutes. They don't care who wrote the initial algorithms. They care about who owns the legal title, who manages the board, and who can deliver the final product. You're an engineer, Ethan. Take your small payout, run along, and let the adults handle the real business." The entire board sat in absolute silence, watching me to see if I would explode, scream, or throw a fist. I could feel the sharp edge of the velvet ring box resting in my jacket pocket, heavy and cold. "Where do I sign?" I asked quietly. Chloe blinked, slightly caught off guard by my complete lack of resistance. "Page 12. Right above the red line." I pulled a simple black pen from my pocket, flipped to page 12 without reading a single paragraph of their terms, and signed my name with steady, perfectly even strokes. "There," I said, sliding the signed document back to her. "That was remarkably sensible of you," Julian chuckled, picking up the paper to inspect the signature. "I knew you were a practical man at heart." I reached into my pockets. First, I pulled out my primary master security badge and the physical brass keys to the server vaults. I dropped them onto the center of the table with a loud, metallic clatter. Then I reached into my inner pocket, pulled out the velvet ring box and opened it. The diamond ring caught the harsh fluorescent light of the boardroom. Chloe gasped softly, her eyes widening as her cold composure broke for just a fraction of a second. "Ethan, you mentioned last week that this was just a budget rock from a local jeweler," I said softly, placing the ring right beside the server keys. "You said I lacked vision. So you can keep the ring, Chloe. Use it to remind yourself of what you traded away." "Ethan, don't do this here," Chloe whispered, her cheeks flushing red as the board members whispered among themselves. "I'm done," I said calmly. "The company is yours now, Julian. Good luck with the defense contractors." I turned on my heel and walked out of the boardroom without looking back. My shoes echoed sharply against the polished marble floor of the corridor. The receptionist offered a sad, confused smile as I passed the front desk, but I didn't stop. I stepped through the heavy glass main doors of the skyscraper into the warm morning air outside. The noise of the city rushed over me, but inside my head, everything was crystal clear. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my encrypted mobile phone, and dialed a private number stored in my speed dial. It rang twice before a deep, authoritative voice answered. "Ethan?" "Uncle Arthur," I said, keeping my voice completely steady. "It's time." General Arthur Vance paused on the other end of the line. "Are you absolutely certain about this, son? Once I initiate the protocol through the Department of Defense registry, there is no undoing it." "I am certain," I said, watching the elevator lights inside the glass tower reset for the boardroom floor. "Revoke my Tier 1 security clearance immediately. Pull my personal keys off the federal gateway." "Consider it done," General Vance replied firmly. "The network will drop in 60 seconds. "Thank you, Uncle," I said, ending the call and sliding the phone back into my pocket. I crossed the busy street, walked into the small coffee shop directly opposite the tower, and sat down by the window to watch the show. I sat by the window in the quiet diner across the street, taking a slow sip of hot black coffee. My phone buzzed on the Formica table. I picked it up on the first ring, recognizing my uncle's secure line. "The registry is updated, Ethan," General Arthur Vance said, his voice crisp and authoritative over the speaker. "Your Tier 1 security clearance has been formally revoked per your personal written request." "How fast will the gateway register the change, Uncle Arthur?" I asked, keeping my eyes fixed on the glass tower across the street. "It is instant," he replied smoothly. "The automated defense protocol checks the global clearance registry every 60 seconds. Without your active encryption signature, the central mainframe will assume a high-level breach and lock down every terminal running your code." "Thank you, Uncle," I said quietly. "You saved me years of legal disputes. You built that platform for the nation's security, Ethan, not for corporate vultures," General Vance said sternly. "Julian Croft is in over his head. Let me know when you're ready to rebuild." "I will. Goodbye, Uncle Arthur." I hung up and placed the phone back on the table. Outside, through the large diner window, I watched the third floor of the skyscraper across the street. The floor-to-ceiling glass paneling gave me a perfect view of the main boardroom. Suddenly, the large digital screens in the boardroom flickered, turned bright red and went completely dark. I could see frantic movement inside. Julian Croft slammed his hands onto the mahogany table, while Chloe rushed toward the wall terminal, desperately tapping the keypads. Figures inside the room began pacing back and forth in utter panic as the military representatives stood up, pointing angrily at the blank monitors. "Mind if I sit here?" a smooth, confident voice asked from beside my booth. I looked up. A woman in a tailored navy suit stood holding a ceramic coffee mug. I recognized her immediately from tech journals. Sophia Sterling, the brilliant founder of Sterling Capital and Julian Croft's fiercest corporate rival. "It's a public diner, Miss Sterling," I said, gesturing to the seat opposite me. "Help yourself." She sat down, taking a slow sip of her coffee while looking out the window at the growing chaos in the glass tower. A quiet, amused smile touched her lips. "I just checked the public federal registry," Sophia said, turning her sharp green eyes to meet mine. "Your Tier 1 clearance vanished 3 minutes ago. I assume that red screen over there is your doing?" "I simply exercised my right as a clearance holder," I said calmly. "Without my active credentials, the software is dead code. They own the company, but I own the operational security." "Julian Croft spent 2 years trying to corner the defense encryption market," Sophia chuckled softly. "He thought he could push you out, steal your work and sell it to the highest bidder before you realized what hit you. He vastly underestimated you, Ethan." "Chloe did too," I said, looking down at my coffee cup. "They assumed I was just a code developer who didn't understand how high-stakes business works." "Well, they are currently finding out how wrong they were," Sophia said, leaning forward on the table. "The Department of Defense Procurement Committee doesn't tolerate system failures during live contract demonstrations. Julian's reputation in this city is ruined by lunchtime." "That was his own choice," I said. "He wanted complete control. Now he has complete control of an empty shell." "So, what is your next move, Ethan?" Sophia asked, her tone shifting from playful to entirely professional. "A man with your genius doesn't just retire after turning off a server." "I build again," I replied plainly. "From scratch. Without snake investors or dishonest partners. Why start from scratch when you can start from the top?" Sophia smiled, reaching into her jacket to pull out a pristine business card. She slid it across the table toward me. "I've been watching your work for 3 years, Ethan. I know you built every single line of that core code yourself." I picked up the card. "What are you offering, Miss Sterling?" "Full venture funding," Sophia said directly, leaving no room for hesitation. $50 million in capital, complete ownership of all new patents under your name, and my personal legal team to shield you from whatever desperate lawsuits Julian tries to throw your way." I stared at her, genuinely surprised by the directness of her offer. "And what do you get out of this?" 40% non-voting equity in our joint entity," she answered without missing a beat. "You keep absolute control of the technology, the board, and the vision. I handle the corporate sharks and open doors that Julian Croft could only dream of entering." I looked out the window one last time. Down on the street level, police cars and military security vehicles were pulling up to the entrance of the glass tower. The fallout had officially begun. "No corporate interference?" I asked, looking back at Sophia. "No secret board votes behind my back?" I invest in people, Ethan, not corporate traps, Sophia said, raising her coffee mug toward me. I know talent when I see it. And I know you are the future of this industry. I looked at the card in my hand, feeling the heavy weight of betrayal finally lift off my shoulders. The ice in my chest vanished, replaced by a clean, sharp focus. Do you have a contract ready? I asked. My legal team can have the papers drawn up by 4 o'clock today, Sophia replied with a warm, triumphant smile. Do we have a deal? I picked up my coffee mug and clinked it gently against hers. We have a deal, Sophia, I said. Let's build something they can never steal. My phone vibrated against the wooden bench for the 42nd time today. I didn't need to look at the screen to know it was Chloe. Her messages over the past 2 weeks had spiraled from arrogant demands for my master keys to desperate, weeping voice notes begging me to remember our 5 years together. Ethan, please? Her voice rasped as I finally answered, pressing the phone to my ear without saying a word. I'm at the park fountain, Chloe, I said coldly. You have 10 minutes. I hung up before she could respond. Across the grass, the downtown skyline loomed, anchored by the cold glass tower of Vance Hayes Tech. Or what was left of it. Federal agents had spent the morning raiding the floor, seizing servers and hard drives after Julian tried to run government-contracted software without my active Tier 1 clearance. A minute later, footfalls crunched on the gravel path. Chloe collapsed onto the far end of the bench, gasping for air. She looked hollow. The sharp, immaculate image she used to project was entirely gone. Her coat was wrinkled, her eyes swollen and dark with exhaustion. Thank you for meeting me, she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't think you'd come. The federal lawsuits became public record an hour ago, I said, staring straight ahead. I figured you'd be too busy with lawyers to walk in a park. It's a nightmare, Ethan, she choked out, burying her face in her hands. The FBI seized my personal laptop. They think I helped Julian bypass the security protocols. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know he was selling unlicensed federal builds. You signed off on the launch documents as vice president, Chloe, I pointed out, my tone even. You stood right beside him at the press conference while he called my code his personal breakthrough. He lied to me, she cried, looking up with tears spilling down her pale cheeks. Julian promised me we were building a future together. He told me you were just being bitter and stubborn about leaving. And you believed him because it was convenient. I was stupid. She moved closer, reaching out to grab my arm. The second the grand jury subpoenas hit his desk this morning, he dumped me. He fired me from the board and told his legal team to pin the clearance fraud on my department to protect his own skin. He ruined me, Ethan. She tried to lay her trembling hand over mine, her fingers icy against my skin. Please. Look at me. I pulled my hand back, folding my arms across my chest. Don't. Ethan, please, she sobbed, her voice dropping to a raw, broken whisper. We spent 5 years building a life. We were going to get married. I made a terrible, horrific mistake, but I still love you. I know you still care about me underneath all this anger. Can't we just fix this? Can't we start over? Start over? I laughed softly, though there was zero humor in it. You gave Julian my master access protocols. You helped him vote me out of my own company. He manipulated me. You made a choice, I corrected her, turning my head to look her dead in the eye. You chose his ambition over my loyalty. You thought he was the winning horse, Chloe. But you forgot that he didn't write a single line of the foundation. I was lost, she pleaded, reaching toward me again before dropping her hands into her lap. He made me feel like I was part of something bigger. I see through him now. He's a coward. He's nothing compared to you. Just help me survive the federal investigation. Tell the inspectors I had no access to the clearance keys. Give me a second chance. Trust isn't a software system, Chloe, I said, reaching into my jacket pocket. You can't just reboot it when the server crashes. I pulled out a folded document and held it out to her. She took it with shaking hands, her bloodshot eyes scanning the bold header at the top of the page. What is this? She asked, her voice faint. It's the press release going out to the wire at 3 o'clock, I replied. Sterling Vance Dynamics is officially launching today. Sophia Sterling funded $50 million for complete operational control, and my uncle's military division just awarded us the defense contract Julian lost this morning. Chloe stared at the paper, her lower lip trembling as the reality settled in. Sophia Sterling? You partnered with Julian's deadliest rival? She recognized the value of the creator, not just the asset, I said, standing up from the bench. Julian's stock is going to hit zero by the time the market closes today. He's facing federal fraud charges, and you're caught right in the crosshairs of his sinking ship. Ethan, don't leave me like this, she begged, standing up quickly, the press release slipping from her fingers and landing on the dirt. They're going to indict me. You can tell the prosecutors I was just following orders. Please. I have a company to run, I said, looking down at her one last time. And unlike Julian, I actually know how to build something that lasts. Ethan, she screamed as I turned my back. I didn't look back. I adjusted my coat against the chilly wind and walked toward the street, where Sophia's black town car was waiting at the curb. With every step away from the park, the noise of my past faded, replaced by the quiet, sharp clarity of what came next. 6 months had passed since everything crumbled across the street. Today, the cool breeze high above the city carried no trace of smoke, panic, or defeat. Standing on the private glass terrace of our new headquarters, I leaned against the railing, taking in the sweeping view of the skyline. Still can't get over this view, Marcus said, stepping out onto the balcony with 2 glasses of scotch. He handed one to me, his grin widening. It certainly beats that tiny basement room we crammed ourselves into during our first week. We made it work, I said, taking a small sip. How are the final deployment metrics looking? Flawless, Marcus replied, leaning his forearms against the stainless steel bar. The server clusters went live an hour ago. 0 latency. The Department of Defense couldn't find a single bug if they brought in a team of cryptographers. They tried, a voice chimed in from behind us. Sophia Sterling walked out onto the terrace, holding a dark leather folder stamped with gold foil. Her heels clicked sharply against the tile floor, her expression carrying that familiar razor-sharp satisfaction. Is that the signed deal? I asked, turning to face her. Signed, sealed, and officially filed with the Federal Procurement Office, Sophia said, handing me the document. Sterling Vance Technologies is officially the sole defense provider for the next-generation security architecture. Marcus let out a low whistle. $150 million on day one. Julian must be throwing chairs in his holding cell. If he has access to chairs, Sophia remarked dryly. His bail was denied yesterday afternoon. The federal prosecutors added 4 more counts of wire fraud and corporate espionage to his indictment. What about Chloe? I asked, keeping my voice level. Her assets were frozen last Tuesday, Sophia replied, resting her hands on the balcony edge next to mine. Her legal defense team walked away after she couldn't cover her retainers. She lost her penthouse, her credentials, and every tech board position in the state. No firm will touch her. Karma moves fast when the Department of Justice is driving, Marcus said, raising his glass in a silent toast. She made her bed with Julian. Now they get to share the bankruptcy filing. I looked down at the street level, watching the tiny yellow taxis crawl through the concrete grid far below. A part of me thought I would feel a surge of triumph hearing about their ruin, but all I felt was a profound, quiet calm. You're quiet, Ethan, Sophia noted, studying my face. Most men would be gloating after tearing down the people who tried to steal their life's work. I didn't tear them down, Sophia, I said softly. They destroyed themselves the moment they tried to run an engine built on lies. I just pulled my clearance key and walked out the front door. And signed a contract with me, she reminded me with a faint smile. Best decision you ever made, brother, Marcus added, clapping me firmly on the shoulder. If you hadn't walked away from Vance Hayes, we'd still be fighting over equity in a sinking ship. You built something better, Sophia said, her tone unusually gentle. You didn't just survive their betrayal, Ethan. You outgrew them. I realized something over these past 6 months, I said, swirling the dark amber liquid in my glass. Revenge sounds great when you're hurt, but it's an exhausting full-time job. I didn't need to spend my life trying to crush Julian or ruin Chloe. They handled that part all by themselves, Marcus laughed. Exactly, I agreed. Karma took care of the debt they owed. But choosing to walk away, choosing to start over from scratch with people I actually trust? That's what saved my life. To freedom then, Sophia said, raising her glass toward the horizon. And to building an empire that nobody can steal from us. To freedom, Marcus echoed, clinking his glass against hers. They both looked at me. I lifted my glass, letting the late afternoon sun catch the amber light of the scotch. To freedom, I said. We stood together on the high terrace as the sky shifted into deep shades of orange and violet. Below us, the city lights began to flicker on one by one, illuminating the vast grid of possibilities stretching out into the dusk. The glass tower across the avenue, the cold building where Julian had taken my office and Chloe had broken my trust, was mostly dark now, its sign stripped from the facade by court order. It was just an empty monument to greed and bad code. I took a sip of scotch, turned my back on the old skyline, and walked inside toward our bright, glowing bullpen where my engineers were already hard at work on the future. The weight that had pressed against my chest for years was entirely gone, replaced by a clean slate and total control over my own destiny. I didn't need to look back anymore. The cost of my freedom had been high, but as I sat down at my desk alongside my real partners, I knew it was worth every single cent.